So, who's really in charge of your local police department? Is it the mayor, the city council, the sheriff you voted for? Well, let's get into it, because the answer is way more complicated, and honestly, a lot more surprising than you probably think. The whole idea behind American policing is built on this concept of home rule. We don't have a single national police force, right? The system was designed for local control. The police are supposed to be accountable to the people they serve, reflecting the values of their own community. That's the dream anyway. But is that dream still the reality? When you really start to pull back the curtain, you see that local control is getting squeezed from all sides. And what that means is the leaders you actually elected, your mayor, your city council, a lot of the time their hands are completely tied. Yeah, you can think of it like a pincer movement. Coming down from above, you've got the massive power of the federal government. And then, squeezing in from the side, you have this huge, growing influence from the private sector. And together, well, they're changing the entire game of who actually calls the shots. All right, so let's break that down. First, let's look at that squeeze from above. How in the world does Washington, D.C. get local cops on a federal leash? Well, it's not just one thing. It's this really powerful one-two punch of money and legal muscle. It really comes down to the classic carrot and the stick, right? The carrot, that's billions with a B in grant money. But, and this is a big but, it all comes with strings attached. And the stick? That's the threat of the Justice Department investigating and suing an entire police department, which can literally put them under direct federal control. So, the carrot. We're talking about these huge federal programs, you might have heard of them, like COPS grants or Burn Jag. They hand out billions to local police. But this is key. It's not free money, not by a long shot. If you want that cash, you've got to adopt Washington's priorities. Suddenly, your local department is being told how to hire, what data to collect, the whole shebang. It starts to feel less like your town's police force and more like a franchise of some national chain. Okay, so what happens if a department doesn't play ball? Or, more seriously, if they're found to have a pattern of violating civil rights? That's when the feds bring out the stick. And that stick is called a consent decree. Basically, the Department of Justice sues a city, and the end result is a federal judge taking over, who then appoints an independent monitor, who is, by the way, usually a very, very expensive private consultant, to run the show. And this whole setup has spawned something experts call the compliance industrial complex. I know it sounds a bit intense, but it's pretty simple. It's a whole cottage industry of these private monitors, consultants, and lawyers who make an absolute fortune overseeing these federally mandated reforms. Think about that. We've created a system where fixing policing has become a for-profit business. And guess who foots the bill? You do. The cost to local taxpayers is just staggering. I mean, just look at some of these figures. In Chicago, they capped the monitor's pay at almost $3 million a year. The head monitor in Cleveland billed the city $550 an hour. That's your local tax money, money that could be going to parks or schools, being rerouted to pay these federal overseers. And don't think this is some quick in-and-out fix. Oh no. These consent decrees can drag on for years and years. Case in point, the Seattle Police Department. They've been operating under federal oversight for more than a decade, over 12 years. So you have to ask, right? At what point does a temporary fix just become a permanent federal takeover? Okay, so that's the squeeze from the top. Now let's talk about the other arm of that pincer movement. Because at the exact same time, you've got this powerful push from the private sector coming in from the side, and they're standardizing and privatizing policing in ways that completely sidestep local democratic control. A perfect example of this is a company like Axon. The taser and body cam people. They don't just sell you a camera. They've built an entire system. Check this out. First, they lobby Washington for federal grants to pay for police tech. Step 2, they turn around and offer grant assistance to help local police departments apply for that exact same money to buy Axon products. It's brilliant. But then, here's the kicker. Once a department has their cameras, they are locked into Axon's private cloud storage, basically paying what you could call surveillance rent forever. It's a cycle where public money is funneled to create a private monopoly. And it's not just the gadgets and the tech. The actual rules of policing are being privatized. There's this company, Lexipol, that literally writes the policy manuals for thousands of police departments nationwide. So think about that. Instead of your elected city council having a public debate about something as critical as a use of force policy, you have a private company's legal team writing the rules mostly to reduce liability and then selling that same policy to towns all over the country. And this whole trend of privatization, it's literally changing the map of our cities. It's creating these private zones of control. And the source material for this explainer puts it perfectly. This creates a two-tiered system of justice where safety is a commodity allocated by wealth. So what does that actually look like in real life? Well, you've got things like business improvement districts, or BIDs. They hire their own private security to patrol public spaces, and they're often focused on pushing out homeless populations to keep property values high. And they do this while dodging public transparency laws. Or think about big private universities. Many have their own fully sworn police forces. The University of Chicago's police force patrols an area with 65,000 residents who aren't even students. But who do they answer to? A private board of trustees, not the voters. Okay, so we've got the feds squeezing from above and private companies squeezing from the side. But here's where the story takes a really interesting twist. What happens when communities try to build an alternative, something totally different, designed to get away from all this? Well, it turns out even the alternatives are getting pulled into the same machine. Take Community Violence Intervention Programs, CVI for short. The idea is just fantastic. You have trusted local mediators, people from the neighborhood, who step in to de-escalate conflicts and stop violence before it happens. No police needed. I mean, it's the very definition of a grassroots community solution. Sounds perfect, right? A real local solution. So, what's the problem? Well, the federal government has started pouring a ton of money into these very programs. And on the surface, that sounds like a good thing, doesn't it? But there's a trap, a big one. The federal grants come with those familiar strings attached. They often demand that these community groups intentionally collaborate with police and, critically, share their data. All of a sudden, these trusted local mediators are seen as potential informants for the cops. And just like that, the community trust, the one thing that makes these programs work, it just evaporates. The alternative solution gets absorbed or co-opted right back into the system it was trying to replace. So let's step back and look at the whole picture. You've got the federal leash from above, the private vendors from the side, and even the local alternatives getting pulled into the system. Which brings us right back to our original question. Who is actually in charge here? The source material for this explainer has a great term for this. It's called the hollow sovereign. And it's this idea that your local government still looks like it's in charge. It has a mayor, a city council, a police chief, they have the titles. But the actual power, the real ability to make decisions about public safety has been hollowed out, scooped out, and given away to federal agencies, private vendors, and corporate law firms. So let's just quickly recap the four forces at play here. 1. Nationalization, where federal money dictates local policy. 2. A for-profit compliance industry that takes over when things go wrong. 3. Privatization, where corporations are writing the rules and patrolling the streets. And 4. Co-optation, where even the grassroots alternatives get absorbed by the state. And all of this leaves us with one final, really big question. When your mayor's decisions are overwritten by a federal monitor, when your police chief is using a policy manual written by a company hundreds of miles away, and when the main street in your town is patrolled by a private security firm, who do you hold accountable? When control is scattered like this, it really makes you wonder, where does your voice, your vote, even fit in?